Hello, Demons Fae, and those in between. This is Dizzy, and I will be starting a fanfic by Shooting from Afar entitled You Look Like You've Seen a Ghost. Here's the summary. The runes are wrong. What does that mean for us? Tim hisses over the beginnings of a dozen voices rising in chant. Nothing good, Jason states grimly, frantically racking his brain for any way out. Whatever entity is about to come out of this circle is going to be bearing a fate worse than death. Jason would know. He's been dead. Actually, speaking of being dead, Jason does know someone from the Ghost Zone with enough sheer audacity to help him fight what very well could be an actual demon. With a mental fuck it, Jason begins to chant. AKA, Jason and Danny became friends in the Ghost Zone. This is about to be everyone's problem. Batman just wants to know who this elusive teenager is. Because he's a meta, obviously. Not for adoption reasons. No siree, not him. This fanfic is about 13 chapters long, a little under 40,000 words. Okay, so let's get started on chapter 1, Fuck Around. Jason wakes up in his boxers with chains bounding him to a chair. To the average human, this might be an alarming situation to come into consciousness in, but unfortunately, Jason is not the average human. Actually, he's not sure if he even counts as human anymore, but details. He takes stock of himself and his surroundings, keeping his body lax and his breathing deep so as to not alert potential unfriendlies that he's awake. He's surprisingly uninjured as far as kidnappings go in his line of work, though there is a weird ache in his neck. He vaguely remembers the sharp pinch of a needle entering before waking up who the hell knows where, and assumes that's how they got him. Speaking of, there's multiple voices echoing around him as if bouncing off walls in a ceiling far larger than an average room. Probably a warehouse of some sort, if Jason has to guess. He can also make out the rustling of clothes and some light scraping sounds along with the flash of fire on the backs of his eyelids. It's a low flicker and he doesn't feel any heat, so he's not worried about that at the moment. For now, he tunes into the conversation, hoping to glean some information about what the hell he's gotten himself into this time. For the entire set! At this rate, we'll be ready for the ritual in little under an hour, my lord. Make it 30 minutes. The hour of Thin Veil is approaching, and Almighty has waited long enough. Oh, great. Jason's been abducted by a cult. It takes an absurd amount of willpower not to roll his eyes and give himself away. Ever since he'd crawled his way out of the Lazarus pit, he'd been getting snatched by various occult groups, looking to use him to summon one thing or another every few weeks. Quite frankly, Jason's sick of it. "Unhand me at once!" a voice calls out, and Jason goes stiff, adrenaline flooding his system in a rush of sudden panic. He'd know that obnoxiously petulant tone anywhere. "Damien, chill. Don't piss off the guy with the knife." Tim's exasperated tone chastises, and Jason's eyes fly open. To hell with being discreet. He needs to know what's going on now. He's sitting on the edge of a massive circle carved with an old script and littered with candles. Various people in crimson robes mill about, putting the finishing touches on the floor and dragging seemingly random objects into key parts of the spell. Jason pays them no mind, fully focused on his brothers, spread out equal distances from him on the circle, in the same hog-tied position as him. There's a man in red robes in front of Damien holding a wickedly sharp knife. Tim watches the guy with apprehension, running his mouth presumably in hopes of turning the attention onto him, and Dick is seemingly unconscious. Fuck. If it had just been Jason that was abducted, he could play scared civilian and let the cult spill their secrets as he figured out a way to escape. But his brothers being a part of the scheme led him to believe that this was a bigger operation than the standard run-of-the-mill idiots who happened across a spell book and thought they could gain a power-up in their free time. "Hey, leave that brat alone. He's not the one with Lazarus water running through his veins," Jason calls out, feeling smug when the knife-wielding cultist pauses and turns to him. Damien shoots him a sour look for the interruption, probably disgruntled to have the man's attention so easily turned from him. Kid has serious issues, but Jason ignores him in favor of doing exactly what Tim said not to do: antagonize the guy with the knife. Is your wannabe cult group too stupid to do your homework? I thought my little life and death stunt was well-known in underground circles, but sure, threaten the kid without liquid death inside of him. The guy's lip curls. Silence, sacrifice. You do not understand the gravity of what we're doing here today. Well, we didn't exactly get around to introductions before you went waving a knife around like a kid with a bubble wand. Jason sasses. How about I go first? I'm Jason Todd, and I like to say it's nice to meet you, but... The man abandons his position next to Damien and marches up to Jason, shoving the knife in his face. I said silence, or do you want me to cut out your tongue? Jason opens his mouth, about to say something that will probably get him detongued, but will be absolutely worth it, if you ask him, when another voice joins the fray. What in the world is going on? Just his luck. Mr. Golden Child's awake. Oh, you know, kidnapped by a cult group, probably for some sacrificial bullshit. Just a regular old Tuesday evening. Jason snarks, taking great pleasure in the way Dick's eyes widen as he bucks against his chains, testing their weight. The knife near Jason's face cuts a shallow line down his cheek, and Jason hisses out of breath. He wasn't unaware enough to forget about the lackey, but damn, can a man have a conversation around here? I said silence. Jason shuts his mouth. The cultist smiles patronizingly at him and moves to walk along the exterior of the circle. Now, let me enlighten your dull, unknowledgeable minds. We have brought you here, the foremost influential children of Gotham, to have the great honor of summoning our Almighty and freeing him from his prison. Rejoice, for this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and once he is free, the Almighty will give us strength. Yeah, right. Sounds to Jason like they're going to drown him and his brothers dry for some eldritch being to go on a rampage and flatten half the city. Not on his watch. Jason turns his attention to the circle and starts in surprise. The writing isn't ancient, and he scans the spell with a growing sense of horror. The runes are wrong. What? Tim hisses over the beginnings of a dozen voices rising in chant. They've got the spell wrong. Damien shuffles in his chair, seemingly trying to get a better look at the floor. How are you? Dick cuts in, and Jason eyes the circle warily. Nothing good. They fall silent, watching the floor begin to glow a soft crimson as the chanting gets louder. Jason's vision begins to tint green as the pits respond to whatever the fuck is being called, and frantically racks his brain for any way out of this. He'd never admit it, but contrary to popular belief, he does give a fuck about the other dumbasses adopted by Bruce Wayne, and whatever entity is about to come out of the circle is going to be bearing a fate worse than death. Jason would know. He's been dead. Actually, speaking of being dead, Jason does know someone from the Ghost Gnome with enough sheer audacity to help him fight what very well could be an actual demon. It's been years since they last spoke, with Jason being resurrected, trained by the League, and then set out on a mad warpath and all, but this particular ghost is one of the very few people Jason will genuinely and unabashedly call a friend, so he figures it's worth a shot. With a mental, fuck it, Jason begins to chant. The feeling of the pit rising in him grows to a dull roar, and judging by his fully greened out vision, he can only assume his eyes are glowing. Out of the corner of his eye, he can see his skin beginning to pale, but he doesn't stop, desperate and willing to put all of his energy into this last trump card. Slowly, the light around the summoning circle changes from a blood red to match the neon of Jason's irises. The temperature drops, an arctic chill blowing through the room, extinguishing the candles and sending frosty patterns over the floors and walls. Ectoplasm bubbles out of the runes, stopping right on the line of the circle, creating a perfectly round pool of noxious green liquid. The entire thing ripples violently, sending little splashes of goop onto Jason's legs, but he keeps chanting. There are spots in his vision when a shape begins to rise out of the pool, dark and withering. It glitches like it can't decide on a form, the only clear feature being a pair of glowing eyes, the same color as Jason's own. Jason finally falls silent, gasping and heaving breaths, and allowing himself to slump forward and blink rapidly as the strength begins to return to him.
Who dares summon the Ghost King?
The apparition speaks in 100 overlapping voices, distorted and grating on the ears. One of the cultists steps forward, like an idiot. Almighty, we have brought you to this plane and freed you from your prison of internal darkness. Grant us your power, and you can rule this mortal realm with us as your faithful servants. The apparition waves a too long limb, and the man's mouth freezes shut. The cultist's eyes widen, but the others take the frozen mouth of their fellow practitioner as an invitation to surge forward toward the hulking mass like a group of toddlers rushing an ice cream truck. Oh, this'll be good, Jason chuckles, just as the apparition loses its patience and sends out a wave of freezing wind, blowing the ridiculous cloaks right off the practitioners. They finally take the hint and scatter, leaving Jason and his brothers tied down with an eldritch nightmare. In other circumstance, they might be fucked. But Jason knows this particular cryptid and their penchant for dramatics. Thanks for the save, Phantom, but do you think you could get me out of these chains? Jason says, in as much of a monotone as he can muster, while shivering violently. And maybe find my clothes? It's a little chilly in here for boxers, Wait. Jason? The chill fades, frost melting into little puddles, and the apparition condenses into a dark cloud of smoke, which Danny pops through, eagerly coming to hover in front of him. Holy fuck, I thought you passed on! Jason grins, accepting the pat on the shoulder and stretching his sore arms once he's been phased through his chains. Danny rushes off to do the same for Tim, Damien, and Dick, who stare at the ghost with wide eyes, and Jason takes the chance to study his friend. He notes that the eternal teenager's white hair didn't used to float like that. His canines are definitely sharper than the last time he saw the guy, and he's wearing a new cape and a crown in the time that it takes for Danny to retrieve their clothes from a shadowy corner and dump them at Jason's feet. Yeah, I wish, but nope, got thrown right back into the living world like a bat out of hell. Danny snorts at the pun. But what about you? Jason gives him an obvious once-over, letting the teenager know that he's noticed the changes. Last time we talked, you were complaining about fighting off the box ghost, but it looks like you got a promotion. Danny rubs the back of his neck sheepishly. Yeah, Pariah Dark pulled my whole town into the zone, and I sort of defeated him in single combat. Jason whistles, impressed. Damn, good one, your majesty. He emphasizes the title just to watch the guy squirm. His friend has never been a fan of attention, and Jason's rewarded by Danny blushing green. Jason, Dick cuts in with a curious tone. Who is this? Jason blinks. He's honestly forgotten they had an audience, too caught up in seeing his old friend again. He gestures loosely at Danny, who's floating a foot off the ground beside him. Meet Phantom, the Ghost King, and my friend from the Infinite Realms. Phantom, these are my brothers Dick, Tim, and Damien. Hold up, wait, you know the Ghost King? Tim squawks, with his t-shirt halfway over his head. Oh yeah, Jason and I go way back, Danny grins. We both make killer jokes about dying and have really shit luck, like, all of the time, which apparently hasn't changed in the 2 years I haven't seen you. He elbows Jason, throwing him off balance while he's trying to pull his pants up on stiff legs. Oh, fuck off, you're not any better, Jason grumbles, shoving the asshole and his unnaturally cold elbows away from him. Touché. His brothers stare at him incredulously, and he sighs, resigning himself to having to explain this half a dozen times by the end of the night. We met in the Infinite Realms, otherwise known as the Ghost Zone, when I was 15. I was in the middle of hijacking an interesting-looking bike. Johnny's. You were stealing Johnny's bike. The guy with a rampaging shadow core and an emotional attachment to said motorcycle. Danny interrupts exasperatedly. Jason flaps his hand in dismissal. Details. I was hijacking a sick-ass bike because I was bored when Danny just walked up and thanked me. I thought he was out of his fucking mind, so I told him so, and we've been friends ever since. Danny rolls his eyes. That was the fastest and most undetailed version of the story I've ever heard. Did you lose your dramatic flair with the return of your heartbeat? Hey, I'll have you know, Mr. Eldritch Nightmare, I've still got it. But if you think that was oh so terrible, you tell them. Denny grins and leans in as if about to spill a particularly juicy secret, and Jason snorts at the way his brothers all mimic the action. Okay, so there's this city that I haunt, and it's kinda overrun by ghosts. Not all of them are obnoxious, but a few cause issues for the humans, so I try and send them back to the zone when I can. Johnny's generally chill unless he has a fallout with his partner, Kitty, and they had a massive fight. So I went into the zone to try and do some damage control before they moved their argument into the living dimension. They didn't listen though, and I was on my way out when I saw this scrappy kid stealing Johnny's bike and thought he'd heard the fight too and was trying to help. So I thanked him. Turns out he just wanted to take a joyride, and since Johnny won't be seen in public without his bike, and I was really tired of playing mediator, I offered to steal the keys. I don't even know where to start with that, Tim admits, sounding faint as he taps away on the phone that he'd retrieved from his clothes. Put your pants on before you go down a goddamn rabbit hole, for fuck's sake. Jason groans, far too used to his brother's hyperfixations on anything vaguely interesting. To be fair, finding out your previously dead older brother is friends with the Ghost King, who apparently also steals motorcycles, does count as a little more than vaguely interesting, but he digresses. What language were you chanting in? It's not one I recognize, Damien asked, staring suspiciously at Danny all the while. Jason rolls his eyes at the polyglot. Most of the zone just calls it ancient. What were you saying, though? Dick asks, and Danny perks up, answering before Jason could get a word out. Every ghost has an echo, which is essentially a calling card, kind of like a pager. Most summoning spells include them, which is why they work in the first place. But the whole drawing a pentagram on the ground thing isn't necessary if you have a connection with who you're trying to summon. I just took the liberty of hijacking the cultist circle for Danny because I really didn't want to meet whatever the hell they were trying to raise, Jason adds. You paged the Ghost King with an incorrect summoning circle to save our lives, Dick marvels, looking at Jason like he's never seen him before. Damn, Jay, I didn't know you cared so much. I don't give a fuck about you, Jason immediately defends, sending Danny into a fit of laughter. I was saving my own ass. Now, where the hell is that bat? There's no goddamn way you three chuckleheads got snatched without him getting wind of it. He's on his way. I texted him as soon as I hacked past the signal jammer. Wait, this is Gotham, right? Danny cuts in, looking to Jason, who nods. Shit, then that's my cue. I have a feeling your dad isn't going to be ecstatic to see what looks like a meta in his city. Hold up. What do you mean, Jay's dad? Do you know Batman's identity? Dick exclaims. What do you mean, looks like a meta? Damien demands. Wait, Danny, he wouldn't... Jason tries to reassure him, but the teenager's already gone. This concludes our reading of You Look Like You've Seen a Ghost, Chapter 1 by Shooting From Afar. First of all, I love fics where Jason and Danny are connected. I think I've kind of already said it in some of my other recordings, but I just want to reiterate how much I freaking love when Jason has a connection to the Infinite Realms, and this seems like a very fitting way for both Danny and Jason to meet each other. It's just really cool. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say. I'm really excited to get started on this fic. This is actually one that I believe, if I remember correctly, I went ahead and looked into for myself. If there is somebody who recommended this and I don't remember, please do let me know down in the comments so I can give you the proper credit. But yeah, so I do really like this fic. I have read it before, and it's really fun, and it's great. In addition, this author is super cool and actually has an additional fanfic, kind of, but it has a whole bunch of inspiration photos, so anything that I'm talking about in here that you're like, okay, what does that look like? They actually have a book full of all that stuff, so you can get a really good idea of how everything looks. I think it's really cool. I don't know if anyone else is going to think it's really cool, but I think it's cool, so it's cool. But yeah, please share your thoughts on this golden piece, and don't forget to check out the original author linked in the description to express your thanks. In addition, let me know if you have any other recommendations. I'm always looking to add to my hoard. Seriously guys, I'm going to start running out of fanfics, and I would really like to do some one-shots in between my longer series, so please do reach out if you have any recommendations. And of course, thank you for listening to this Dragon's Hoard.